My name is Ryan McVeigh. I'm a director at CF Consulting. I'm responsible for our ECM practice and the FreshDocs mobile application, which was the basis for the Alfresco mobile app. I also serve as one of the secretaries on the CMIS technical committee and represented in my past PA systems and I'm today Zia's lead representative. She is here.
And my name is Ji Lee. I'm a principal consultant, also at CF Consulting. I'm also the architect for the Alfresco mobile and the FreshDocs mobile applications. I'm also a member of the CMIS technical committee. Reference me, right?
Thank you. I'm going to go for a few slides. Gio, do a technical guide. Just a brief one slide on who CF Consulting is. We're a platinum partner of Alfresco. We are also a platinum partner of Episoft. We do a lot of things in ECM. We've been around almost 9 years now. And to make a long story short, the biggest thing we focus on is making our customers happy and having raving fan customers. Good enough. So an agenda of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of the Alfresco mobile application. I'm going to share with you a little bit about the architecture. A little tiny bit of CMIS as a refresher, since that's the basis of the technology for the application. Do a short demo of the app, and then G will come up and do a technical walkthrough and talk about the open source details. This is an open source application. And then I'll come back and finish up with the roadmap and we'll do some Q&A. So the history of the app. We actually released, as I mentioned before, a FreshDocs application for iOS back in December of '09. And that was born out of a gentleman named Michael Mueller at ZF, who's the product manager now for the application. Needed, frankly, something to do in his evenings, and was very interested in iPhone development and learned a little bit about CMIS, and thus FreshDocs was born. At the same time, or very shortly thereafter, we worked on an Android version of the same app. It's also available. It lags feature-wise, and then there's not yet an Alfresco Android application. We entered into a partnership with Alfresco this year for Alfresco Mobile, and thus we helped produce that application. A little bit about the architecture. This is obviously very simple. Essentially, it's mostly a CMIS application talking to a targeted Alfresco server. There are some specific details where we talk to Alfresco services directly. G will work through those details here in just a few minutes. Because there are features, obviously, that are specific to Alfresco that are not represented in the CMIS specification. So just a brief refresher of what CMIS is. I guess everybody here knows probably by now. But in short, the goals and scope of the technical committee were to enable applications to target different ECM repositories in a uniform manner, provide a set of basic services enabling richer ECM applications and use cases, and then allow loose coupling of ECM applications for the various repositories that are in your enterprises. And then, of course, exposing those through popular protocol bindings, REST and Atom Hub, as well as web services. And thus, good technology choice for an iPhone app. So let's switch to a demo. I'll talk just a little bit about the features and so on. As we've said, it's CMIS. I'll show you how it logs in. There's HTTP or HTTPS connections available, and a handful of the features with regards to browsing and searching and adding content. And the ability to create folders and so on. You saw Jeff do a fantastic demo earlier of actually taking a video using the native iOS video controller and then running right through the FreshDocs application, I'm sorry, the Alfresco mobile application, and uploading to that hosted server. Additional features, some of these things you guys probably haven't seen yet. The app that we're demoing today is, as Jeff mentioned, the 1.1 application, which isn't available yet in the store. Stay tuned, really soon now. Apple does not make that process easy, so there's some time constraints. But shortly you'll see that app in the store, so I'm going to demo some new things, including, for example, Alfresco activity streams and so forth. So let's get right to the demo. So let's switch over. Perfect. I'm going to start actually in the settings application. So if we scroll down, here's and you'll see I have two Alfresco apps. And what I've done here is we've provisioned our development instance onto my iPad here. So I have the one from the store and then the latest and greatest. I'll show you settings from this one. I'm connected to a test server on my end where I have full privileges so I can log in and do interesting things like creating content and looking at the metadata. We're not using HTTPS or anything exciting. And there's a couple of other new features that if you've looked at the app, you may not have seen before. For example, we're caching downloads and so on now to make the application perform better. So we'll flip back over. Launch the app. There we go, in theory. And you'll see right away, this is a little bit different than the version in the store now, right? We have the split view because it's actually iPad. If we go back this way, the menu goes away as a traditional iPad app, and then you open it up, and there you go. Something else that's also new in 1.1 is this ability to filter by sites. So I have sites that I'm a member of, I have favorite sites, and so on, right here in the app. And again, we can flip back and forth. I think it demos nicely sideways. So let's go into the DevCon site that I created earlier. And what you'll see is a couple of content items. Let's pull a little bit down. This will download a small guy. And here's some of the Alfresco marketing material with regards to mobile. Some of the features in the app that you've probably seen before, but let me just walk through so everybody's familiar. Of course, obviously, you can do simple things like browsing and getting to content. These little icons on the side here will pull up the actual metadata. Over time, this will expand to show more interesting metadata when the content types are, when something other than the CM content type is applied. Wow, my phone's on. We'll go back and take a look at the dock again. And from the dock, I can actually go in and do a couple of interesting things. I can open in other applications on my device, like Evernote, for example. We're connected up to AirPrint. I think that's new with the release now. Email, in the case of a Word doc, it shows it an attachment. I'll do it with an image in a minute. You'll see it's in line right in there. I've identified the document now as a local download. You'll see on the bottom across where activities and so on, there's the downloads. And so if we flip over, you'll see a bunch of these things that I've downloaded in my cache already. And then also on the document, see we've got an integration right into the comments function that you see in Alfresco Share. I've added a comment earlier. We'll add one right now. And save that off. And in just a moment, there it is. And I'm not going to go pull up Share and show you, but I'm sure you can do that on your own instance and see that's integrated as you would expect as well. Another neat thing coming here in the updated release is our activity stream. This is one of our hosted sites. So you see a bunch of other things from some of the other Zia guys on here as well. I think that covers it for the demo. I'll make sure that I don't have any questions, and then G will just jump right into the technical since we started late. All right, I'm good. We're back over to the slides.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. The design of the application was essentially a navigational-based app. It's a hierarchy of table views, very simple. That's how the app essentially started. With Alfresco Mobile, we've started layering on Alfresco specific functionality that isn't CMIS-based. The application code base is also a universal binary. So essentially the code, the binary that you would download, you can install on your iPod, your iPhone, and your iPad. It's all in one code base. Now, when we switch to the design for the iPad, again, it's still a navigational-based application, but now we're using iPad-specific controllers, specifically the split-view controller. And again, we're still using it as a universal binary. The code base has code for essentially the iPhones and the iPad. All right. Next, features that we use that are specific to CMIS that relate to the application are Browse and Company Home, which are the Get Children services. Download Document, which uses the Get Content Stream service. Metadata, which uses Get Type Definition. Search, which uses a query service. Upload uses the Create Document. And all these services that are CMIS-based, we use the Atom Pub binding. Features that are specific to the Alfresco RESTful API, the activities feed, the viewing and adding of tags, comments, the ability to like a document, and sites list. So those are those. All right. Sorry, I got 30 minutes to sort of go over an app, and so it is going to be sort of a high level, but we'll jump in a little bit deeper. Now, when the application launches, the way that the app works is it requests for a CMS Atom Pub service document. Once we get that service document back on the Documents tab or the Browse tab, it then requests for the site list. It requests for your favorite sites, your My Sites, and then all your sites. After that, if you have Company Home turned on, it requests the folder children for the root collection in the service document. And then when you navigate into a site or any of the folders that are listed, or any of the subfolders, it uses the Get Children service. For the activity stream, after the app launches, we have the service document. You switch over to the activity stream. It uses Alfresco API to retrieve the user's activity stream. Once it has that list, currently right now, we allow you to click on a document cell. So an activity that's related to a document you could click on, and it uses the CMS Get Object by ID service to essentially download the document. If you click on the info icon, then it uses a Get Type Definition service to download your properties. Let's see, next. For search, search is pretty simple. It uses CMIS, and it uses a query service off the query collection. Now, some of you might be interested. We haven't really said how it does search. We offer two ways of search: full text search and then search based off a name. For full text search, we just use the CMS verb contains, and use your contains keyword. Now, for the CMS name, it's a little interesting. CMIS doesn't have the ability to do a search that is case insensitive. However, we work around that by actually performing a contains or full text search on the CMS name property. And by doing that, we actually are able to do a case insensitive search on CMS name or the name of the document. Now, just real quick, common patterns that you'll see in the code is when we call an Atom Pub service, the device or the code base will instantiate a CMIS RESTful request. It calls Alfresco. Alfresco returns an Atom Pub XML document. For creating an HTTP request, we use the ASI HTTP request library. This is for the code that's 1.1 based. We create an ASI HTTP request, and then we have delegates that handle the request when it comes back. The code is fairly simple. You have your string to your CMS request. You instantiate your request. You send it off. For security, we only allow basic auth headers. I know Alfresco has other ways to authenticate. However, for the CMIS-based spec, since our app was essentially a CMS browser app, basic authentication is the only one that's available across all repositories, and so that's what we went with. Parsing Atom Pub XML. When we get the Atom XML that returns, on the device, or for iOS, we use event-driven XML parsing, essentially SAX parsing. For SAX parsing, we have the parser essentially sends messages out to its delegates. Delegates then handles elements the messages, events that come back. Most of you are probably thinking, why aren't we using a DOM parser? It's much simpler. It's a tree-based API. For the iOS, Apple does not provide a DOM-based API. They just don't. However, for our needs, we really don't need one. Just parsing XML using a tree-based API is really simple, and it's actually recommended by Apple. I mean, if you guys want to do a DOM-based parsing, you guys can look into third-party libraries. And here's some code. Essentially, you set up a parser, you give it a delegate, and then you tell it to parse, and then the parser sends out messages. parser did start element, parser did end element, parser found characters. Essentially, these are the 3 methods that we use to parse XML. So it's really simple. Now, when we're calling Alfresco APIs, the setup is essentially the same. We're doing RESTful HTTP requests. And with Alfresco, with the RESTful API, we can ask the type of response to get back, and we actually like JSON. We tell it to return us JSON responses. The reason why we like JSON is it's super simple. It's really easy to consume, it's fast, it's lightweight, and we really like it. There's a library called SBJSON. I believe it was previously called JSON Framework, and it makes parsing and using JSON objects super simple, super easy. It just makes it really simple. It just fits in with the iOS Objective-C key value programming layer. Now, CMIS 1.1, we're really excited about CMIS 1.1 because CMIS 1.1 is going to have a JSON browser binding. It's called a browser binding. Essentially, it's JSON, and when CMIS 1.1 gets released and gets adopted by a lot of repositories, we'll probably adopt it into the Alfresco mobile code base. We might do it sooner, we don't know yet. So I guess the most interesting part for some might be the open source availability of our code. We are now hosting the open source code on bitbucket.org. So if you go to bitbucket.org and search for Alfresco Mobile, you will actually find the repository. It's open, and we're releasing the project under the MPL 1.1. When you're going through the code, some of the APIs that we use are, of course, many of the Cocoa Touch frameworks. It's the APIs that Apple provides for your iOS devices. For our HTTP requests, we use ASI as HTTP requests, which it's for server communication. And it's essentially, it's a wrapper around the core foundation network API, which is a pretty low-level Cocoa Touch API. As I mentioned, we also use SBJSON, which is the JSON parsing library. And for our unit testing, we use GHUnit. And all these are open source, Cocoa Touch. If you guys do want to start, digging into the code, looking at the code, these are the things that you will need to know. You'll need to know Git, because that's the version management system that we're using. Objective-C, which is the programming language. You'll need to know iOS app programming, the Alfresco RESTful APIs, if you want to do any server work, and same CMIS atom pub binding. To get you guys started real quick, the Apple provides excellent documentation guides for developing on the iOS. Specifically, I have them listed. These are the ones you guys probably want to target if you guys are just diving into iOS development, view controller programming, table view programming, key value programming, memory management, the big one, and iOS human interface guidelines. Besides the documentation, 2 of the books that we recommend from Zia are the Grapefruit book, also known as Beginning iPhone 4 Development, excellent book for getting started, and the Objective-C, Programming Objective-C book from Stamps Publishing, also a great book. When you guys dig into the code, some of the common design patterns that you'll see is the model view controller design pattern, delegation, and targeted action. These three design patterns are core to a lot of the iOS frameworks, programming models, and just being able to get in there. Tools for iOS development, you will need to have a Mac with OS X. You can't, if you don't have a Mac with OS X, you can't get started. Apple just doesn't let you. You will need Xcode 4, the latest version, and you'll need instruments. Well, you don't need instruments, but instruments is highly recommended. It comes installed, I believe, and it's for your performance and behavior analysis tools. Xcode is essentially your all-in-one IDE environment. It's your development environment, it has your build system, it has an excellent debugger, it has an interface builder for building GUI-based UIs,
And it has your iOS simulator, everything from your iPhones, any version that you'd like, out to your iPads. And again, with different SDKs. So if you do want to get started, the first things first is you need to create an iOS developer account. It's free. Just go to developer.apple.com and sign up. Next, once you have your developer account, then you'll be able to download and install Xcode 4. After that, the next thing you do is clone the repository from Bitbucket, and that's a command. And then you'll open up your project. When you open up the project, you guys will notice that there are 2 targets that we've included. One is for FreshDocs and one is for Alfresco. And it shows the build process, and it shows how both applications share the common code base. Now, once you guys have the app running, what you'll do next is you'll select a target that you'd like to build, and select the simulator you'd like to use. Hit the play button, the run button, and then you'll have the app running on your Mac, instantaneously. Now, if you do want to install it on your device, the process is a bit more. First, what you would have to do is go sign up for an iOS developer program account. This is different from a developer account. There's 2 different types. There's standard and enterprise, and this is where you got to actually pay some money to get these accounts. Once you have your developer program account, you got to configure your profile, which includes setting up development certificates, your app ID, provisioning your devices, provisioning your certificates. It might sound easy. It's a pretty big process. However, Apple provides excellent documentation again to do that. Last, once you have all your profile configured, you configure it into your Xcode, and then you build your application, and you'll have it on your device. Last, if you guys do want to contribute, we are looking for contributors. It's fairly simple. Using the Git program, using Git and Bitbucket, what you would essentially do is fork on Bitbucket, which is essentially a branch. You'd clone into a local repository. You'd work locally, commit your change sets to your local repository, and then push your changes up to Bitbucket. The changes that you push are to your forked repository, and then from there, once you're ready to submit a patch or your contributions, you'd send a pull request. Once we receive a pull request, we'll review your contributions and then see if we can include it into the application. And Bitbucket has really good documentation around the whole process around that. And I think that's about it, right? So, Ryan, I'll let you finish. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, G. So let's talk a little bit about roadmap. Of course, I can't speak to Alfresco's roadmap for the mobile app, but I can tell you about things that we've thought about. So there's the disclaimer, right? We're not going to make any claims or commitments as to what we're doing. Having said that, these things are particularly interesting and things we've talked about. In particular, browsing the site members, looking at membership across the Alfresco instance, being able to integrate that with the actual contacts on your device and ultimately become a more social function. That's a pretty compelling feature set we've talked about quite a bit. Similarly, of course, searching and browsing just for people throughout and a tighter integration there. We'd like to take the app and integrate more with regards to version history and the ability to upload and version documents as opposed to just adding documents right into the system. And looking at things like the recent documents list or the Alfresco favorites list, a little bit different than the local downloads, are also interesting features. There's more. It's an easier thing to talk about offline instead of up here in the presentation, so please find us afterwards if you're curious. I'll also take a moment just to introduce Marc Dubrasson is walking around. I don't know if Marc's in the room here, but Marc's right here. So Marc's the mobile product manager for Alfresco Mobile. Please seek out Marc and solicit him for your ideas. Similarly, I'm sure he'd like to hear what you'd like to see in the mobile application as well. So what's next? So we were reasonably high level here with the talk today. We're actually hosting a webinar next week. I think it's Tuesday the 1st at 1 o'clock Eastern. There's the link. You can register through there and expect a real in-depth, comprehensive walkthrough of the code, specific examples of the patterns, probably give you a little bit of a debug experience and so on. in that 1 hour session. Of course, G just explained that the code is open sourced. Obviously, we're excited to do that, and we'll be happy to have contributors for that process. Of course, as I mentioned before, Alfresco owns the coordination of the release of the Alfresco mobile app. So, there's some conversation to be had around how that open source contribution applies and when those things make it to the Apple App Store. And that's a little bit different maybe than a traditional open source model, right? Because we have to release through a store, and there's a process there to follow. To that end, we'll of course also coordinate our releases of fresh docs, and those feature sets may diverge. That's certainly possible. One thing I will add, if you are interested in developing a version of the application on your own and releasing it to the App Store first, that's a conversation you should have with us in Alfresco. Apple reserves the right, when they start to see many, many apps that are the same functionality, they'll consider that spam and they'll shut it down. So you want to be careful. Have a conversation first before you go do that. And of course, we have a booth here, so please come see us. There's a little bit of a contact us here for myself and G and Michael Mueller. Michael's not here today, but he'd love to hear from you too with regards to features for fresh docs and of course, anything mobile for us. And with that, we went a little quick today, but I think we're just ready for some Q&A. Mr. Mike. We do have a drawing. Thank you, Mike. We are giving away, actually, an enterprise release branded version of this same application. You can have it say your company's name and your company's logo and color schemes and so on. Come by the Zia booth, sign up, and you'll have a chance to earn that as opposed to paying us for our services there. Yes? Right.
What formats do you have previewers for?
Sure, so I can take that. So what he asked was, for our document previews, so your standard document previews, what type of previews do we have? Or what type of preview renders do we have? Essentially, what we are using in the application is WebKit, which is the iOS native library for presenting web views, documents, videos. And so whatever WebKit can present, we're able to preview in the browser. However, right now, it'll key off of your file name extension, and also it'll key off of the MIME type. So the MIME type has to be one that's supported by WebKit. I don't have an exact list of all that. Okay, great. So
I'll add too, if you have documents in your app or in your Alfresco instance that are not renderable by the app, by the WebKit framework, then the app will say, it can't render it, but then you have that capability of open in. And so if you have a custom app for that, like a CAD file or something, then you can open it in another app from the mobile app directly. Questions? I'm blind, I can't see hands because it's a lot of light. So just
I have one over here. So I have Fresh Docs on my Android phone, and one of the features I really like in it is the ability to configure to multiple servers.
Yep.
It's a pain in the neck in the iOS side to have to go out to settings to change that every time I want to go hit a different one. What are your plans there?
Yeah, perfect question. We actually talked, Mark and I, about that exactly last night. So it's absolutely on our list. I can't, of course, say when, but definitely something that we know how to do clearly, and we intend to add to the application as quickly as we can get to it. More?
How long are you finding it taking to go from, hey, we're ready to get this on the App Store and actually getting through the process?
sure.
That's a trick question.
So if Apple is happy with all the changes, it takes about 3 to 4 days for them, or no, sorry. It takes about 3 to 4 days for them to actually get the app into review. Once it's in review, if it's for the first time, I think they go over it with a magnifying glass and try to find everything they can to reject it. Sometimes they don't. However, once it is in review, it usually takes about 1 to 3 days for them to actually give you a decision. If it's an app that has already been released, they're much more lenient, And usually, again, it's still about 2 to 4 days until it gets into review. And then once it's in review, it's usually 1 or 2 days when they accept it. Now, this is for free-based app. Say if this was paid version, Apple will actually go through your app more significantly. So if it becomes paid, which I don't believe it ever will be, they'll try to find ways to crash it. They'll make sure that it's worth your money. So.
Yeah, and I'll also add we've had varying levels of experience there. And in one extreme case, we've had to take a very, very long time. We can talk after about it, but G's generally correct. And then adding to that, when we talk about things like an enterprise rollout, as opposed to putting something right into the App Store, then Apple is not involved. So if you have a need to have something running locally for your company that you don't need in the store, you control it. It's reasonably straightforward to do. And obviously, Apple doesn't have to review, so you can do interesting things like talk to private methods and APIs and cheat the Apple system if you want. Yeah. The question is, would we recommend TestFlight? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, that's exactly how we integrate with the Alfresco team. Anytime G and team builds a new release of the product, then it's pushed to TestFlight. All of the various subscribers get access to it. It's a fantastic tool, if you want to elaborate.
And yeah, like Ryan said, we are using TestFlight. We're not using all the specific features, the extra features that TestFlight offers, because right now, they integrate with a lot of private APIs that Apple provides, and so if you try to push that code onto the App Store, they'll actually reject it, even though it's not something you'll surface. And so so we haven't really thought about the plan to sort of cleanly keep the two code bases out, so it does go into App Store. But right now, we are using TestFlight for mostly for over-the-air installation, and I believe it's excellent.
You want to elaborate also on what we do for the analytics and tracking?
Yes.
That's all behind the scenes, but it's worth a
Right.
comment.
So
there.
we also have Flurry Lib integrated into the application. It's an analytics-based app or analytics-based library for essentially for Alfresco and Zia, and it doesn't collect personal data. What it really collects is how often the app gets launched, how long the sessions of the applications are, and also if the app crashes and why it crashed. And essentially, that's all what we're tracking. We're not tracking, what repositories you're connected to.
It's all open source. You can go look at it.
Yeah, but so it's all open source. We're just using the most simplistic features of Flurry Lib.
So if you do iOS development, that's something to look at too. If you care about the analytics of your app, it's pretty interesting. No, it's okay. I won't talk about it. Offline.
Yep.
So
Sure.
what parts of the iOS application can you leverage on the Android side?
I'll take it. From a code-based perspective, nothing. It's Objective-C, which begs the question, what would you do, right? With what are the other options of building these apps? But I'll come back to that. Of course, from a technical perspective, in terms of how you use CMIS, how you connect to the APIs, making REST API calls, and so on. That is all obviously knowledge that shares between the two applications. It's a different skill set working in Objective-C than Java, which is Android, dramatically so. And there are a couple of other choices. Of course, this is a native app. You can do an HTML5 app. That certainly will work. What we found talking to our customers and the market in general is there's a much larger demand for a native experience. And people are very comfortable with their tablet of choice and the way it works versus somebody else's interpretation of an HTML5 implementation. And so people would rather pay for that as opposed to HTML5. There's a couple other options. There's some development frameworks out there. I think Adobe has one now that is Flex-based. Is that right?
It is Flex-based. There's a cross-compiling Flex-based system that you can actually compile Flex applications for iOS, Android, Air, on desktop, Windows phones. But
my opinion is it's not mature enough yet. It may get there, but it's not something we're pursuing in any case. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perfect.
yes.
Can you go into a little bit more detail on Flex? I mean, does it effectively generate what looks like a native app, or is it?
It does. So what the Flex stuff does is it loads a Flex-based engine onto your app. And so a lot of the UI controls that you see with the Flex-based applications aren't native iOS Cocoa Touch controls. However, I believe that they are trying really hard to make them look similar, have the same interaction. But some of the apps that I've tested, they don't respond just as cleanly as if it was a native application. But Adobe has smart people, and I know that they're working hard on that. So it probably would improve, but right now.
I guess I would add to that Adobe and Apple don't play nicely together very often, and so I would personally be concerned that there's the possibility that would continue. I don't know. Again, I can't see hands. It's bright, so yell if you've got a question. I think that's it. Well, we'll be here for the rest of the conference, so find us if you've got questions. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you.
Thank you.